Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here as the HAPS coordinator and to introduce my friend, Jim DeBoer, who is an adjunct associate professor of music at Hope and the director of the program of the Awakening Institute. I've known Jim for many years, admired his musicianship. He's from the secondary level through college, and enjoyed talking about the Chicago Cubs with him. We've gone from agony to a moment of ecstasy, and now agony again. He's a fine presenter, and he's better than I am at this, so I'll stop and let him take over.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you for providing this opportunity for me. And it's just a great opportunity to share with everyone here about Awakening. So Awakening began in 2016 after I wrote a grant to the Lilly Endowment, who sent RFPs, requests for proposals, to Christian colleges and seminaries across the country, as they were concerned about the future of the church, youth leadership, and inspiring the next generation of leaders in the church. Today, we're going to look at this framing question. What's the problem we're facing with more leaving the church than staying? Who's leaving? Or what are they saying about their needs and why they're leaving? And we will discover changes we can make within the church that will impact young people who are currently engaged in the local church, and how we can assess our work in the future. In 2011, Barna President David Kinnaman published this book after a study. The book's called You Lost Me, after which they heard from many people, especially church leaders, who were shocked to learn that 59% of young adults with a Christian background dropped out of church at some point during their 20s, and many for a time, but some for good. Then 8 years later, in 2019, the research for Kinnaman's new book, Faith for Exiles, reveals the church dropout problem is still an issue. In fact, it's grown. This slide shows you that 2/3, basically, of 18 to 29-year-olds who grew up in church tell Barna research that they have withdrawn from church involvement as an adult after being active as a teen. And that was prior to the pandemic. So what percent has grown today? The focus of Awakening is to engage and to retain these young people who are still in the church, to engage them and provide them with a vision and a possible calling on their lives to ministry in the church. Let's watch this video. Many youth today, whether it be high school or college students, don't feel church is important to them anymore, or it might just be just about the youth group, but what about the actual church service? They don't feel invested or cared about.
There's lots of pressure. There's a competitiveness that keeps them close to the work of God. They're aching for a chance to discover Jesus in themselves and in each other. And so all the Awakening really is giving them this raw space to be themselves in a way that they can't be themselves in their schools and their other activities.
Yeah, I had no idea what Awakening was going to be like. So I walked in having one set of expectations, and they were blown out of the water.
The first day was a little awkward for me, but after that, there's so many great people here, and I made a lot more friends than I thought I would.
I had no idea what to expect. I appreciated how welcoming everybody was. I came into this not knowing anybody. I was a little nervous at the beginning, but it was much greater than I was expecting.
With one of our students who was particularly shy, blew me away just to see the transition from being a little bit more closed, a little bit more sheltered, to being filled with laughter, filled with joy.
This year, I really focused in what it means to find your calling and your vocation. So it's very meaningful for me to go through my story with the students, leading them and hopefully inspiring them to find what it means to have a calling and how to answer that call.
This year our focus was on Ephesians 4:1-6. We were one in the Spirit, one in the Lord, one in community with each other.
Really, oneness provides opportunity because as we draw closer to each other, we draw closer to God.
One, I think, gave them a vision for what it looks like to be young people in the church, unified in the same mission.
So the oneness is discovering Jesus in a community.
If you're thinking about coming to Awakening, stop thinking and do it.
If you want to develop your music further, if you want to develop your worship abilities further,
You've got a gift you want to honor God with.
Even if you're just the slightest bit intrigued,
Go to Awakening for community.
And be with people that love music and love God. Like, what else do you want to do?
This camp's an automatic yes, or at least it should be.
So it gives you just a little sense of what we're trying to do in Awakening to make a difference in these young people. So Barna didn't just do 2 surveys, they did 3, and each one they spun off a book. So Kinderman and Matlock researched and spoke to youth across the country to determine what causes them to leave, what causes them to stay. And the 2019 book that you see here, Faith for Exiles, focuses on 10% of the students who they call are really resilient. Okay, they stay focused in faith, they stay focused in church. And why is that? Well, these 10% equate to just under 4 million 18 to 29-year-olds. That's called Generation Z, and we'll talk about that in a second. These are folks that are really resiliently faithful. So in the book, it has this quote: "In spite of the tensions they feel between the church and everyday life, they keep showing up." Why? What we want to learn, the who, what, and why. We desire to know the issues that cause these students to not value the church, to leave. And Barna asked, what's the problem? So they asked. The first thing the students said, what they wanted from a church would cause them to stay, is that I want to find a way to follow Jesus that connects with the world I live in. They don't want to live in 2 worlds where I go to church and do my thing there, and then I go in the world and that's totally separate. They wanted them to be blended, right? Second thing, is God more at work outside the church than inside the church, or inside the church? They wanted to discover that answer to that question. And they said, I want to find a way that I want to be a Christian without separating myself from the world around me. And from my studies, knowing students for years that are 10 years old to 40 years old, the Generation Z and millennial generation, I find that it's about meaningful human relationships with godly friends and non-believers. That's what they want. They desire, basically, to have relationships. And I think we all do. So as a reminder, this slide shows you the various generations today that researchers like to slot into groups, right? Based on interests and passions and what things affected them as they were growing up. So it's not always correct, but overall it's roughly accurate. Find your generation here. And once you do, and it's based on 2022 numbers, and then look for our target group, Generation Z, the second to the bottom slide. You'll see those are students 10 to 27, and we already have a Generation Alpha. Now the next slide is going to show what resilience looks like. And there's a lot on this slide, but look at the bottom of the wheel where it says meaningful relationships. You'll see it on the left-hand side and the right-hand side. And if you can read that, I hope it's not too small, but it says, I want the church to be a place where I belong, and there's someone in my life who encourages me spiritually. Okay, those were high ratings. There were 70, 80 percentiles. But here's the interesting thing. We have another grant that Hope did through Virgil Gulker called Generation Spark. And Virgil, a great friend of mine, you might know him too. Virgil is a founder of Kids Hope, right? Which focuses on children and adult mentorship. And that has blossomed across the country and the world. But it comes back to that same thing, the relationships that they desire. So look at the lowest scores, the 67 and 70 percentile. It says, not that those are low, but of the scores, they're not as high. And so they're not quite as excited about the mission of the church and that they regularly receive wisdom how to live faithfully in a secular world. That's what they desire. They're getting it, but they seem to want more of it. Now, this next slide shows, it's not a Christian poll, but it's a general poll of people in this age group, okay? And you see on the slide, Generation Z on your left, that's the folks that are the younger group, right? The millennials are a bit older. And if you look for that, look for spiritual maturity on the list, and you'll see it there for Generation Z. You won't see it on the millennial side. Most of them, not most, but many of them have left the church already, unfortunately. So Generation Z, we still have hope. And this slide I really like because it talks about where teens receive spiritual guidance and encouragement. So the dark blue at the top, that's the mom. And the questions, I'm going to move out of the slide a minute, encourages me to go to church. The mom has the biggest influence. But look at the second largest influence. That's the color of grandparents. And as a grandparent of a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, I can tell you, I don't think I would have much influence on my grandchild's life. But those statistics of thousands of kids, if you're a grandparent listening to this, you have huge influence. You out-influence a father in many instances. Encourage me in other ways, sets an example, talks to me about God's forgiveness. And you actually, the grandparents, teaches me about tradition, right? So you're number one there. But I would have guessed, without looking at that friends would have been at the top. But no, mother in most categories, and grandparents, and then father. Therefore, since these students, let alone ourselves, need leadership encouragement from others, I believe this to be true. When we start by investing in people and what matters to them, they will be more open to human and godly relationships. So from the Barna study, the above is from Generation Z. Again, that's ages 10 to 27. These are the questions they're asking and the underlying issues playing out inside of them. Who am I? How does the media influence me? What is my identity? Where does my creativity come from? And how should I view others? When you see creativity, that's where we will get into the arts in a moment. These are our future leaders. What's important to them in their sense of self is using their gifts in the arts, and it not only provides fulfillment, but also an opportunity to feel they're making a contribution to the world. So they want to contribute, they want to belong. They don't want to just be passive and receive. They want to know they're helping others, and that gives them confidence. So they use their worship arts gifts to provide a sense of belonging with others. So when we look at the arts and creativity and giftedness that God has given to every human being that he's created, how are they looked? Let's look back. What took place in the church in the past with arts? So back in the day, after Jesus sent out his disciples to multiply and make disciples, they were persecuted. The Romans persecuted them, and they had an underground church for a while, right? Christians lived in catacombs. The Romans were afraid to even go in the catacombs because of the ghosts, right? So they were living among the dead, literally. But if you go to the catacombs, you find artwork on the wall, very primitive, flashcard-like artwork, but artwork from Christians there telling stories because they didn't have manuscripts to read. They didn't read, first of all, so it was artwork told the story. The church was the center of much of the arts afterwards, after the Roman persecution. Church became the center of the arts in the medieval days and in the Renaissance. During the Renaissance, education flourished. The artists worked to teach about the Bible and faith with their visual drawings. Again, reading was still very limited. So Martin Luther lived during this time of transition toward the second half of the Renaissance, and he warned that art and icons should not be the focus of worship, but should point humankind toward God. Idolatry focuses on the art itself, neglecting the true creator of the arts, God. So some reformers who protested against the church also protested against the arts. Luther wasn't saying he wasn't against the arts, but others were. For example, I can give you a musical example of Ulrich Zwingli. He and his band of marauders went from church to church, destroying organs, beautiful organs. He was against the organ. Now, why would that be? Because that was a focus that he thought people had of music, and it should be just the word of God alone, or singing a cappella. We know that in churches change over the years, and there was a time even here in Holland where it was a big deal to sing something other than psalms, right? The psalms were what the Reformed Church was supposed to sing, and then they introduced hymns that were not scriptural, even though they were scripturally based. And that was an issue, let alone having services in Dutch and then moving to services in English, which Hope Reformed Church began to do when it was first founded. Protestantism actually revolted against the arts as part of their protest. Now notice the protest in Protestantism, right? The word of God alone, art. The church had formerly controlled the government and culture. The Catholic Church, amazing culture, amazing art. But because the Protestant church walked away from the arts, secular culture began to take over the arts. And with that was the education system grew. So people became more educated. It didn't have to come all from the church down to them. So we see how vital the church was to arts and culture. Worship used to simply involve a single pastor or leader in our lifetime. So we've seen changes that have taken place within the church during our lifetime, right? Many changes. I remember when I was just out of college, I would direct a choir, but it was in the back of the church. And I was like, why is it in the back? And they're like, because if it's in the front, it's distracting. People want to listen and not be looking at, what people are wearing. I'm like, well, we wear robes so people aren't distracted for what they're wearing. Oh, they're still wearing faces. So we have changed much, right? Even the seeker focus service, which began 30, 40 years ago. So music would change. You would hear more secular style of music in the church with Christian words to engage somebody that's not a believer, to make church service an opportunity for people to find Christ, which it should be always, right? But church focus has changed a lot in the last 30, 40 years. And what we don't realize or don't think about usually is the kids, Generation Z, don't know anything about that. Nothing about that. They assume church is what they have now. And one of the things we do in Awakening is we take them to different churches. So we go to a liturgical church, more classic worship, and the students that come from contemporary services go to that and they're like, what is this all about? Oh, wow, you got to really, this goes to this step and then this step. So they learn the different elements in liturgy and they're really excited about it. They had never learned that before. And students that are a part of a liturgical church will go to a contemporary church in Awakening with all of us, and they'll experience that. And then the pastors and those who lead will speak to us about why they have that focus as a ministry. And then we always attend a Catholic church as well. So Father Charlie Brown will lead us in a mass, and he will do it in a different way. He'll stop many times throughout and explain. About 15% of the students in Awakening are Catholic. So they're geeked out when they get to go to mass. Well, they don't do the Eucharist. And Father Brown explains what the Eucharist is. And boy, the eyes just open up when they hear about what that means, right? So that is amazing how things have changed over the years. So the Lilly Endowment have seen the changes that have taken place within the church and the statistics of decreasing numbers. The endowment put out a call, like I mentioned at the start of this, to seminaries and Christian colleges to create institutes that would engage students in the work of God in our world and point them back to the church as having a relevant role in society. Only 4 of these institutes focus on worship. And after I wrote the grants and received it, I learned who other grant writers that had received it from different institutions were. And one was from Baylor University, and I've been down there and talked to him, and he's been up here to visit ours. There's also one at Samford, and likewise, we've done an exchange there, and Pepperdine is as well. There's an institute. They're not called Awakening, but similar focus on worship. So what is the mission of Awakening? Building emerging worship leaders. And what is our vision? Where God's Spirit meets with a group of people in such a profound way that it opens their eyes to God's activity in the world, renews and gives vision to their sense of purpose and calling, and marks their lives forever. So the purpose of Awakening is to develop students' artistic gifts for use in worship, deepen their passion for God, and awaken their heart to glimpse a vision of their own leadership in the church.
Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. One of the reasons we formed Awakening is because so many people do not see or desire a need for church in their life today. And church is about a body of believers that come together to celebrate and to help each other and encourage each other.
We're doing this worship camp for high schoolers, and we're trying to train up the next generation of worship leaders and church leaders.
Coming into this, I didn't know much about it. So I thought, hey, I'm probably just gonna learn the same things that I've had for a while. But no, that wasn't true at all. I learned a totally different way of worshiping, a totally different way of praise.
My expectations were just praise and worshiping Jesus, basically. But when I got here, the atmosphere was just more than that. Like, it was overflowing with Jesus.
These students show up, and I think they all probably have a little bit different expectations of what this week will look like, even the ones that have been here before. But through the way that they engage with us, with each other, with our staff, they are taking everything that we're teaching them, and really what we're teaching them is to just sit with God.
I really believe that worship is giving up your heart to God. And when you give your heart, part of your giftedness that God has given you is lifting up that giftedness to Him.
Worship has a breadth and a richness that few of us have really experienced in all of its facets.
It's amazing to bring together our worship sensibilities with our artistic sensibilities. Worship and arts, really the soul of what we're doing.
I don't think either the arts or the church can really be completely what God meant them to be without each other.
Being a Christian sometimes in the world is lonely, but when you take a whole bunch of lonely people in their faith and you bring them together in one spot where they're all working on something together, you get this transformative community that we saw happen this week.
I go to a public school, and there's Christians like here and there, but it's not evident, I would say. So it was different for me to be amongst everyone who's Christian.
Something that I've always struggled with is I have so many friends that don't know Christ, and being able to share with them the word of the Lord, it's just amazing.
All these students, they have these intuitions about who they are and who they're supposed to be, but they don't find anyone like that around them. They don't find that in their friend group. I desperately needed that when I was in high school, just some mentors that were just a little bit older than me to show me the way
So that's really my expectation is, let's just open the door for them. Let's invite the Holy Spirit in.
The lessons I learned here and the spiritual disciplines that I learned here are things that will influence my life forever, really.
Like, this was an inspiration, and it makes me want to be a better person and tell the people of the great works that God has done in me and everyone that I have became friends with.
If there is any part of you that has a passion for what does worship look like, what should worship look like, come here.
Come for the arts, come for learning how to train and develop your skills. But the biggest gift of the awakening is who you are with other brothers and sisters, like-minded people.
If you are a Christian and you have musical arts or any type of arts gifts, dance, drama, preaching, whatever you think you might be interested in, come.
When the night is holding God is holding on.
So these are high school students who are focused on their faith, and our job is to build them up. So what do students experience in Awakening? Thank God for video, because you get a sense of it, right? So I'll try to explain it. So they experience a variety of styles of worship, like I just mentioned to you. One of our goals is to take them every year to 3 different churches. And if they come one year and they come the second year, which about 75–80% of our students come again a second year, or some come the third, and some have come the fourth, we change it up. So if we go to Christ Memorial one year, the next year we won't go to Christ Memorial because the kids have already been there before. So we rotate. We've been to about 12 different churches in the area. And the exciting thing is this pastoral staff will literally do a worship service for us. It could be at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or it could be at 7 o'clock at night, and they get the choir to even sing. At Third Reform, that's what they did. And so our students experienced, and they usually do the service they had done the Sunday prior. So they had run through it, right? Pastor's sermon, the only thing they don't do is the offering. So it's a great opportunity for kids. But my most exciting part about that, not only the fact that they get to learn about different styles and why, is afterwards, I asked the pastoral staff and the worship staff, everybody that was involved, to come up to the front. And they will share God's story in their life and what brought them to ministry. So students have heard stories as different as, I used to play at bars all the time and I would get drunk every weekend. And now look at what God did, redeem me, and I lead worship. To another story, just the opposite of that. My mom tells me when I was 5, I would take the cushions off the couch, stack them on each other. I'd put a Bible on the top, and I'd start preaching as a 5-year-old. And now look, I'm a pastor. So they hear all different pathways, the way God can trace his finger in their lives. There's not just one way, right? So the variety of styles they experience. And so not only in the chapel will we worship, but we worship at Western Seminary. Every single day we have a worship service. Even when they come on a Sunday afternoon, we have a worship service that night. And a small group settings indoors, outdoors on campus, and 3 area churches that partner with us. Students have the opportunity in Awakening to experience personal contemplation in community with one another. So we write a prayer journal, and the students work through that prayer journal with the interns. And Hope College students, actually this past couple of weeks, I've been interviewing our Hope College students that are interested in becoming interns. They are here for 2 weeks. We train them 1 week, where we as leaders are the interns and they are the high school students. We do some role playing that way. And then the second week, they are the interns. They're the leaders of their small group of 7 or 8 students. So 2 interns together lead a small group. And every morning, that group has personal Bible study. So the students will go through the scriptures or readings that we've put together in our curriculum, and then they'll come back together with their small group and share insights that they've received from God. We ask them to be quiet in their time alone. So they go all over campus. They spend 45 minutes, maybe in the balcony of Dimnett Chapel, one student, or outside the steps. We see them all over. And then at a certain time, they come back together, share, and then we go to worship. That's our daily practice. Now, here's the interesting thing. Because of media, we ask students, and we actually require, and it says this in their general instructions, that they not have cell phones with them at all during the day, and unless they're in their room. They have to stay in their room because that keeps them focused. And the first day, they're like, oh, and you can tell they're a little twitchy because they're used to doing it. Used to looking at the cell all the time. But after day 2 and 3, some actually come up to me and thank me for it because they're like, I'm not distracted, and I notice no one else is looking at their phone. So when I've shared that with the Lilly Endowment, that has been insightful for them. Another group that I know want the kids to use cell phones during the week, and they say it's distracting, but they like it when they take pictures and post it and share it and all that. But the last day, when we have a half a day, then kids can use their phones, and but it really allows students to focus. So what else do they do in Awakening? Well, there's theological, pastoral, and musical leadership examples of staff and faculty. We hire faculty from the Hope Music Department, Dance Department, Art Department, Campus Ministries, Religion Department, and then we also hire people in the area. So we'll hire worship leaders in the area, pastors in the area to help us teach, and youth leaders in the area. The opportunity for them to assess their experience through conversations and written surveys before and after the Institute is so important. So I give them the high school students, a pre-Awakening survey that they get in an email, and they can do it right on their phone, 10 questions, and then 10 questions, those same 10 questions after Awakening. Oh, and then the parents, I actually survey as well, different questions. And I ask them before their student goes to Awakening, and then I ask them 2 weeks after they come back from Awakening. And it's remarkable. Every time it's the question afterwards is always rated higher, right? Whatever that question might be of, what's your relationship with God today on a 1 to 10 basis? How much do you know about worship itself? We have a variety of questions we ask her. How have you seen changes in your son or daughter spiritually? We'll talk more about that in a minute. And then there's a second track for the Institute where they continue to pursue their interests. So there's different classes they can take if it's a 101 class, a 201, a 301 based on their years in Awakening. So they also learn about the history of God's plan for humankind and his desire for community among believers, which they so desire, especially post pandemic, when we get to that point. They so desired it when we had Awakening this past year. The opportunity to hear personal stories from Christian leaders, like I mentioned before, from a variety of ages and ethnicities who have chosen a career in theological studies or in worship. This past year, I did something different in Awakening. I invited 10 leaders throughout this area to come and go to Jack Miller stage and share in a big circle with our Awakening students and interns, answer 2 questions. The questions I wanted them to answer were, talk to your 21-year-old self. What have you learned about God that you didn't know when you were 21? And what have you learned about the church? So we asked those 2 questions to 10 leaders. And those leaders were just like, one was a gentleman that just retired from Christ Memorial as their worship leader. Another one had been leading worship for 4 years. She's like, well, it's not that far away. But others, it was 40 years of experience. And they loved it. The people on stage did, but what blew me away is the high school students, that was one of the top 5 things we did. And the college students said they lost track of time. They didn't realize it was an hour and a half. I thought an hour and a half, Jim, you're really pushing it. But and so we made a video of that, and that is on our website if you want to see it. So going back to the slides, they witnessed the great need for the church today from these leaders, right? And the last slide, they craft a worship service. So not only do they practice their gifts in worship of the arts, so if they play acoustic guitar, they have acoustic guitar lessons. If they're a dancer, they have dance lessons. If they play harp, we had harpists. They have harp lessons. We've had 3 students that play pipe organ, and 2 actually have come to Hope on serious scholarships. 1 leads worship at Christ Memorial Church every Sunday, and he's a student. So I think that's remarkable. So whatever their gift is in the worship arts, visual arts, even preaching. So we have John Brown from Pillar has been our teacher of the preachers. And in this worship service called the Festival of Worship, their small group that gets together every morning and throughout the week, they craft a service together with some key elements. How do you begin a worship? Okay, call to worship. What does it look like? So from responsive readings, they put it all together. And then at the Festival of Worship, the end of the week, they do that. And I'd like to invite you, because it's open to the public. And believe it or not, this last year, in the middle of masks at Dimnit Chapel, we had like 250 people spread out throughout the auditorium, but our biggest attendance was 400 the year before the pandemic. So feel free, it's June 16 at 2 o'clock. Feel free to come to the Festival of Worship to see these high school students lead worship. It's one of their highlights of the week. So questions raised that we discuss at Awakening. How do we want kids to dig deep, right? So what's the value of worship and why do we worship? We talk about that. We have classes on that. What has your experience in the church been like as a student? We want to hear from them. What are important elements in all worship services, and how can the creative arts be engaged within a worship service? They have ideas. We just don't ask. What does an authentic Christian look like? It's fascinating what they say. What would make you want to be part of a church as you move into adulthood? And then, what is your personal story? And they don't ever think about that, right? They kind of live in the moment. So when you ask them, what has God done in your past to bring you to where you are today, and what could he do in the future? We have a student who was in Awakening for 4 years, and she chose not to go to college because she didn't feel God calling her to do that. So she ended up being an intern in the Reformed Church denomination for 2 years. And she wrote an article about God's story. So she's coming back 2 years out of Awakening and going to teach us about how to write story. So I just love what that says. So the pivot year, just to give you a little background, we had done Awakening in 2016, and then in 2020, everything right around the world came to a halt. So I asked the students with surveys that had registered, said, we can't do it in person, but do you want to meet 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon throughout the week, or 2 weeks? And overwhelmingly, they're like, we're Zoomed out. No, we don't want anything to do with that. I said, well, what if we did it like the first Sunday of each week in the month of June? Instead of the first week, the second week of June, let's do it the first. And that was palpable to them. So we did that. And then I had this idea, well, why don't we just continue it all year long? Instead of every Sunday, let's do it the first Sunday of the month. And we called them First Sundays. So on the first Sunday of the month, all of 20 and 22 and 21, we met online. What did we talk about? Well, we talked about a variety of things. We had leaders. So Felix Theanagraha, president of Western Seminary, and some of his staff talked to our students about what seminary is, because many students in high school don't know it. So they learned that. Then we had one of our Hope College worship teams share what it's like to be on a college worship team. What kind of things do you do in a college worship team? So we had leaders from across the country, songwriters. A gentleman from California, Tommy Walker, showed the students how to write a song in an hour, and he had them contribute to it. He had them like sing a little lick for me, and he put that little tune or motif, you might say, into the song. And then even the text, give me a scripture verse that's meant something to you. So that was so invigorating for students. But the other thing we did during COVID, which was a blessing that I had never thought of, is because the staff couldn't be present with students, I asked the staff, whoever was willing to do this, to create videos, just informal videos on their phone or however they wanted to do it, on their discipline. So John Brown at Pillar Church made 4 videos, 5 minutes in length, of how to create a sermon. Okay, and it's not a full thing, but it gets you started, right? It gets you intrigued. Dave Purnell, how to techniques for acoustic guitar. So we had 20 different videos, a little more than 20 different videos on different topics, from visual arts to dance to writing a sermon. So the Awakening Institute, we're an institute, right? So we have to produce. And one of the things we've produced is 10 pegs of a worship leader, a manual for students leading worship. And I brought one along here in person. So that's what this looks like. We've also produced songwriting for worship. And that is with 15 different songwriters from across the globe, from Ireland, England. It's fascinating. And you know, I use the term composition, but the new term today in vogue is songwriting. So that's what we use. And from prayer journals we've written for every single awakening. So now I typed in 4, but we've really had 5. And Josh Banner leads us in that. So that's a little picture of another one called 40 Ways to Spend 5 Minutes with God every day. So we want kids to set that apart. So they're spending time with God every single day in quiet. Picture high school kids, how busy their life is, the cacophony of noise and stuff happening and social media and all that. In an awakening, it's like they get away from that. And it's like a breath of fresh air, and they just so appreciate that. And they do carry out into practice. Not all, there's no way to know for sure, but let me give you an example from this past year. I had a father call me about 2 months after awakening. My phone number is on the website, and it transfers from my home phone to my cell. And I picked up, and he said, Mr. DeBoer, he said, I just want to tell you a story about my daughter. He said she has been in awakening a couple years now, and she went on a date with a boy that she was friends with. And this boy she had dated for about a year, and she came in the house crying. And we're like, are you okay? And she went right to her room, and she said to us, he beat me up. And we asked to come in her room, and sure enough, she was black and blue. It was starting all over her shoulder. And so we left her in her room because she wanted to be alone. And an hour later, she came out into the living room, and she was a different person. And so we said to her, why, you're feeling better now? Why? She's like, I went to my awakening prayer guide. And that meant a lot to me, she said. And the father said, she said she journaled, she read scripture, and she said it always helps her focus back to God. He says, we're eternally grateful. This is another resource that we've provided. This is the 6 steps, and that's the songwriting for worship, because those of you online weren't able to see the booklet that I was holding up for those who are present here today. And these are all available for downloading on our website, okay? So, quotes. Remember we talked about why students, it meant a lot to them? Here's some quotes from the hundreds I have, okay? 1, I love this camp. This was my 3rd year. The first year changed my life, and it continues to be changed every year. Another student said, we found unity in our differences. Another said, it wasn't what I was expecting. It was better. Plus, it was so much more educational and teaching than I expected, which is great. We don't, I don't change their grammar. And another one wrote, I was able to see how beautiful a Christ-centered community is and how I want to see that in my everyday life. Another quote, I made so many friends, and the whole awakening group felt like such a close community by the end of the week. I was able to grow in my song leading skills. And most importantly, I stepped out of my comfort zone to share my gifts and ideas with other people in a way that was humbling and honest. Another, the church is vibrant still. The next generation is ready. Another said, I wrote a song. Another said, I learned how to truly spend time with God. And then another quote, I became more confident in my playing abilities and learned the need I have for community in my life. And then our interns, because our Hope students are vital. Even though they're not the primary focus of awakening, they're a huge part of it. A couple of quotes from a college student. It showed me that unless I have an intimate relationship with the Lord through prayer and solitude, I'll face burnout as a worship pastor and never completely enjoy my job. And another said, I feel more content with where God is in me and what that means in my future. Before there was unrest and anxiety, now there's peace and presence. And many students and interns say the experience was like a glimpse of what heaven will be like. I hear that every year at our final gathering where kids share. And parents, I love asking parents because they are so insightful. One mom said, I see her maturing in her ability to interact in a mature way with friends her own age. I see her growing in her understanding of what it means to lead worship in the church versus just being on the stage playing music. Another parent said, I've seen tremendous growth in all these areas and an introduction to a variety of tools and activities that he can use to enrich his spiritual life. Another said, she's taken notes at church, didn't do that before. And she was the first to stand during worship in church, also never did that. Another parent said, a greater interest in practicing his instrument and gathering with other students for worship. He's taking notes at church now. And another said, his love and awareness for God deeply increased. My daughter was totally filled up with the Spirit, but didn't have a lot of words afterwards, but I could see God in her. And another said she returned with passion, humility, joy, and hunger, and more, and was quite exhausted. And then just this past year, we had a girl in Awakening that was her second year in Awakening. When she went back to her church, her worship leader was let go. So guess who they turned to lead worship? They turned to her. So she had been on the worship team, but because of her experience in Awakening, she felt a confidence level and maturity level. And she is still leading at that church. She leads 3 times a month as their worship leader. And she's a senior in high school. So what can the church do to make the changes to retain and inspire Generation Z students who still care and are engaged? And again, this is the focus, right? That group. Well, I learned a lot from a book called Growing Young. The Fuller Institute put this together in 2016. Here are some findings from Growing Young, one of the most comprehensive and collaborative studies ever done on churches engaging in young people. There's one thing interesting in this title, by the way. It says Growing Young, 6 essential strategies to help young people discover and love your church. If I would have written that, the focus would have been on them to help young people discover and love their church. So here's what they discovered. What a church does not need to do based on interviewing thousands of kids. There's not a specific age group or size in the church. It doesn't have to be a massive church. It doesn't have to be small, little, tiny. You can do it in no matter what the size church you have. You can be effective with these kids. It doesn't have to be a popular church. It doesn't have to be tied to a denomination. It doesn't have to be not tied to a denomination. It doesn't have to have a cool quotient like everybody's going there. It doesn't have to have entertaining worship, these kids said. I mean, it needs to engage them, but it doesn't have to be flash in the pan. And the other piece is, it doesn't have to have watered down preaching. They want to be challenged. They definitely want to be challenged. So what can a church and its people do today to engage more youth in their church? Here's what that book came up with. 1, unlock key leaderships. Instead of centralizing authority, and empower others, especially young people. So that goes back to Generation Spark and Virgil Gulker's gathering students to lead areas of the church with adults. So if you have a committee, let's say it's the building committee at the church, you have a high school student, a part of that committee. Now that person has somebody that's their mentor, that's a part of that. You have a worship committee, you have a high school student or more, college student as well. That's how you engage. That's one of the ways to engage the students with mentors, adult mentors, and having them attend meetings, and even consistories having, or councils having leadership from high school students to be one of the people on there. I know some churches that have high school students that they mentored for a year, and then they're actually voting members after the 2nd year. Second thing from Growing Young, empathize with today's young people. Instead of judging or criticizing, step into their shoes. 3, take Jesus' message seriously. Instead of asserting formulaic gospel claims, welcome young people to a Jesus-centered life. 4, fuel a warm community. So instead of just focusing on cool worship and programs, aim for warm, pure, intergenerational worship. You know, these huge youth groups today are not the thing anymore. They were, but they found out it doesn't work because kids kind of walk away when they're just the big entertaining youth groups. 5, prioritize young people and families everywhere. Make that be a focus. Involve them in all facets and be great neighbors. Instead of condemning the world outside, oh, that's terrible, you know, non-Christians, and they don't believe in God. Enable young people to neighbor well locally, make friends with others that don't necessarily believe, right? So what do youth bring when you have them in your church? I'll tell you just from my experience, they bring more service. They want to do, they don't want to sit. They want to be involved. And man, do they bring the passion, like light the fire. They bring innovation. They have just great ideas. That's why if you put them on different committees of the church, they will add so much. At first, they'll be really quiet, like my church. I remember it's one girl, she was super quiet, but you just draw them out. And having a mentor helps them because they encourage that student. That brings health and energy to your church. And believe it or not, it brings finances because we've seen churches that you get excited when you see your youth, right? And it inspires other people to give to the church. So bottom line, they want to belong. It's all about relationships. You know, we see this exodus of the church or migration right now because of COVID. A lot of people are doing it online, or they're visiting other churches online, or in person visiting. It's kind of a migration taking place. Every church speaks about it because I connect with people. And what people are saying is they will go for a service, and sometimes you have like a few minutes to kind of seal the deal with them. But if they come a second time, they're saying they want to be involved. So I would encourage churches to ask new families to be a part of a group or come over for coffee to your house. It's about relationships. A study just came out yesterday about the importance of small groups. Now, we've said that for years, right? But that's why we're springing off all these small churches today, because these micro churches are really a godly thing, right? That's back when Christ was alive. Micro churches, small groups of people. It's really what we all want, right? We all want to belong. So why Awakening at Hope? One of the things I was asked after I wrote the grant and it was received, one of our administrators said, so this is a college. We focus on college-age students. Why would we focus on high school students? So here's what I said. Awakening is a natural part of our mission. So if you look at Hope's mission statement, it talks about promoting faithful leadership and nurturing a vibrant Christian faith. That's one reason. Another is it's an integral part of Hope's campus ministry's faith formation in our own and prospective students. So these high school kids are prospectives, really, when you look at it. And the college students that work as interns, they greatly develop their faith and experience. It's just a great resume thing for them if they're education focused or youth focused. So data for Awakening, okay, what's transpired over the years? We've had 151 different students in Awakening. And in 2020, if we had held that, we would have had another 30 to 60 because we were on track for the highest enrollment ever. They represent 38 cities, 68 churches, 57 different schools, and 10 states. And this year, we have students coming from 2 more. So somebody's coming from California and someone's coming from Alabama. So we'll have 12 states represented. 48% of our students are from the Reformed denominations in general, then the rest are non-denom, Baptists, Catholic, you name the denomination. So Awakening has been featured in various articles, stories, Hope Magazine in 2016, 2018, the RCA Worship Today, the CRC, the Banner. Speaking of RCA, the RCA has partnered with us. I spoke to them when we started Awakening and asked them if they'd be willing to partner with us financially and with other personnel resources, and they said yes. So for 3 years, they have made contributions for Awakening. This 2022 year will be the end of that, and then we'll have further conversations to see if they want to continue. The Holland Sentinel has had a couple articles about it, a West Michigan Christian News Online, as well as local radio stations. So here's our numbers by year. Our first year was 20, then it doubled to 40, went to 54. And then we had our online year, which had as little as 5 on an online. Actually, there was 3 was our smallest, but the largest was 30 kids on Zoom. And then last year we had 35, which I was very happy with because it was just as COVID was fading in the summer. We tested all the kids before they came in. I had an Awakening student who from high school. He was in Awakening for 4 years, and then he went to Hope, and then he was a nursing student, so he was giving some of the COVID tests. So those are the states that are represented in Awakening, and this year we'll be adding California and Alabama. So far, could be even more. So the impact on Hope. So we've had 24, which represents 38% of our Awakening graduating seniors matriculate to the college, who either are still here or have already graduated, which admissions loves. So they love Awakening, how it helps their enrollment. So and Lily really wants that. They actually ask every year what the matriculation was. They want to know that data. So how does it involve other partners? So Awakening has connected with partner churches and denominations in Holland. Awakening has a partnership with the RCA. Awakening partners with Western Theological Seminary. We use their facility and some of their staff faculty. And Awakening partners with student churches and Christian high schools. So I'll get into a variety of high schools in this area, South Christian, Grand Rapids Christian, and Holland Christian, and even in the Chicago area, Timothy Christian, Chicago Christian, Ileana Christian, Wheaton Academy. And they will offer us, most of them, to even be in chapel. So whether it's a 5-minute time in chapel or the entire chapel service. Holland Christian had Awakening kids on stage, and they just all shared their stories. That was the whole chapel service. So it's so important for the high school kids to hear from high school kids. So whenever I speak at a chapel, I make sure I have someone from their school speak as well. Our data, 4 high school students have given their own money to support Awakening over the past year. So this is shocking to me. I never asked them for a dime, right? Awakening's on a grant. Do we need their money? Right? Not right. Well, actually, now we're going off grant. So because we're going off grant, Awakening to sustain it relies on donations. And $1,200 from kids. Listen to this. 3 Hope students gave to Awakening as freshmen. One girl a $500 check. And then Hope Advancement Office tells me that somebody gave, and I know the student. And I said to her, you could have given that to tuition. You're an average income girl. And she's like, this was my church. So it's profoundly impacting to me when students donate when they're not even asked.
Hi, my name is Cadence Tennant. I went to Awakening for 3 years, and it was one of the best experiences I've ever had. I think the friends that I made there have lasted a long time, at least since I started. And I'm even going to Hope with some of them right now, and they're really amazing people. And I learned a lot about myself and about God too. And I think one of the most awesome things about Awakening is that it's a lot of people who love music and who love God that are just able to spend time with each other. And you just realize that there are so many other people that are like you, and it's just such a joy to experience worship with people like that. And I think while it's really amazing on one hand, my first year at Awakening is a little bit of a revelation when I realized I wasn't as good at piano as I thought I was when I started comparing myself to everybody else. But after that first year, I realized that I had a little bit of pride inside myself that needed to be taken care of. And I came back the next year and I started learning guitar, and it was so much fun, playing in the dorm and stuff. Yeah, and I think it's just an amazing experience, and I would definitely recommend it if you want to grow in your faith and spend time with other believers and experience solitude and contemplative prayer as well. Yeah, I loved Awakening. Thanks. Bye-bye.
So that's one of our students that is at Hope College today who went to Awakening. You can see he was actually in his dorm room. And if I can get the next one to play, let's see if I can.
My name is Amy Sue, and I went to Awakening.
Okay, I'm going to need some help on this one.
I'll be right in. Awakening, I had never really taken the time to just consider what worship means and means
Hi,
to me
my
in
name is
particular.
Cadence Tennant. I went to Awakening.
Then I went to Awakening,
Okay.
and I was just given a week to be able to explore and just grow
Here we
in
go.
my understanding of the worship arts, and it was just absolutely amazing. Everybody at Awakening just went out of their way to make you feel welcome and like you
Yeah, I
belong
think
there.
I'll start it from the
Just
beginning.
all the amazing. My name is Amy Sue, and I went to Awakening in this previous year in 2021. Before I came to Awakening, I had never really taken the time to just consider what worship means and means to me in particular. But then I went to Awakening, and I was just given a week to be able to explore and just grow in my understanding of the worship arts, and it was just absolutely amazing. Everybody at Awakening just went out of their way to make you feel welcome and like you belong there, and just all the amazing experience that the just worship leaders there that spoke just really left me with a deeper understanding of what worship arts means and what it means to be able to rejoice with other people in the process of worshiping God. And just all in all, my week at Awakening was just amazing and life-changing in the best way.
And that's a 13-year-old. She was a freshman. Okay. So why would you be concerned about Awakening? Are you concerned about the church's future, especially following COVID? How will we adapt to a changing world? Are we going to involve youth? And who's going to raise up and inspire the next Christian leaders for ministry? That's what gets me excited, folks. That is why I lead this organization, because I've taught high school for many years and taught every grade from kindergarten to seniors in college. And I just believe in our youth. And we need to raise up and train that next generation. So if you're interested in participating, I'd love if you would be willing to share Awakening with your congregations and pray for continued success and God's blessing. Encourage discerning and gifted students that you might know, or even your own family members, to attend Awakening. Share with your pastors and youth leaders. And if you're interested, Awakening moves off our grant. So each year we raise money. This past year, thank God, we were able to raise $30,000. Next year, our goal is to raise $40,000. You can find out more, hope.edu Awakening. And this shows a service from Western Theological Seminary, which was at the close of Awakening. And you can see that the kids were very engaged. And then what's so unique about worship in Awakening is it involves all the instruments. So we'll have organ, and we'll have instruments of all sorts. We'll have art that the students create on the stage. We'll have students creating art like Amy Sue that you just saw that spoke, the 13-year-old girl. She was so talented visually, visual art. And then she was dancing, and then she was singing. So all the art forms come together. Let's see if I go back to this, if I can play this here. Oops, that didn't work. Hang on.
I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body, and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all, and through all and in all. Many youth today, whether it be high school or college students, don't feel church is important to them anymore, or it might just be just about the youth group, but what about the actual church service? They don't feel invested or cared about.
There's lots of pressure. There's a competitiveness that keeps them closed, as I was saying, to the work of God. They're aching for a chance to discover Jesus in themselves and in each other. And so all the awakening really is giving them this raw space to be themselves in a way that they can't be themselves in their schools and their other activities.
Yeah, I had no idea what awakening was going to be like. So I walked in having one set of expectations and they were blown out of the water.
The first day was a little awkward for me, but after that, there's so many great people here, and I made a lot more friends than I thought I would.
I had no idea what to expect. I appreciated how welcoming everybody was. I came into this not knowing anybody, and immediately I stepped in and there were people greeting me. I was a little nervous at the beginning, but it was much greater than I was expecting.
With one of our students who was particularly shy, blew me away just to see the transition from being a little bit more closed, a little bit more sheltered, to being filled with laughter, filled with joy.
This year, I really focused in what it means to find your calling and your vocation, because it was around the ages that the students are now that I really started to dive into, okay, what is my purpose in life? So it's very meaningful for me to go through my story with the students, leading them and hopefully inspiring them to find what it means to have a calling and how to answer that call.
This year our focus was on Ephesians 4, 1-6. We were one in the Spirit, one in the Lord, one in community with each other.
Really, oneness provides opportunity because as we draw closer to each other, we draw closer to God.
One, I think, gave them a vision for what it looks like to be young people in the church, unified in the same mission of spreading the gospel and furthering the kingdom.
So the oneness is discovering Jesus in a community.
If you're thinking about coming to Awakening, stop thinking and do it.
If you want to develop your music further, if you want to develop your worship abilities further,
you've got a gift you want to honor God with.
Even if you're just the slightest bit intrigued, go for it.
Go to Awakening for community.
And be with people that love music and love God. Like, what else do you want to do?
This camp's an automatic yes, or at least it should be.
Now, one story from Awakening. Each year, there's moments of God sightings, right? That you have in your life, and we have during the week of Awakening. I remember one year we were at the beach because we go for an afternoon and evening. And when we were there, we were singing together in a group circle, and adjacent to us was a woman in a bathrobe. I would say she was probably in her 80s, and it looked like her son next to her. Her son was in a suit, but she was somewhat frail. And one of the interns came to me and said, "Can I talk to her? I feel like I should talk to her." And I'm like, "Sure, yeah, go for it." And she came back to me and she said, "You won't believe that story. touches me just thinking about it. She grew up in Michigan with her family, and she moved to Detroit area. Her son stayed in Holland, and her other family members were in Detroit, and she was diagnosed with cancer, and she didn't have many days left, and she asked her doctor if she could go to the lake one more time. She was a Christian, and she went there, and she discovered us singing. So it meant the world to her. And little did we know, right? Just a God moment, but a big God moment for her life. And that touched the kids too, in big ways. So it's time for questions. So does anyone have a question, either in person or online? Feel free to type one in and I'll do my best to answer.
I do have a couple questions in the chat. First is actually a comment. It says, what a wonderful place we have to offer in Holland with the beach to attract the kids.
True.
Now, there is a question. The next question is, how can I get my church involved? And I'm not sure how to interpret that, but I'm thinking to be one of the churches that you visit each summer.
I would say email me. My last name, DeBoer, D-E-B-O-E-R, @hope.edu. And if you can email me, I will reach out and we'll connect, and I'll come to your church, talk to your youth leader, your pastor. Again, DeBoer @hope.edu. Please, I'd love to.
Okay, I'm not actually in the classroom, so I don't want to talk over any possible questions.
We have one
there.
in-person question. Judy?
Thank you so much. I'm so glad I got to come to this class.
Great.
Grace and I grew up at Maplewood Church, and now we're worshiping at Christ Memorial. So I just remember Grace as a young girl and her family and how we engaged in worship in different ways. But this has been phenomenal. I knew about Awakening, but I didn't know. And I'm so glad that you're doing this. My question is, one of my questions would be, why aren't we doing this 4 or 5 times in the summer? You've got July and August. I am concerned about the future of our church, the Church International, not my particular church, because I think the church is the people. And I don't know, there's so many things I wish I could have just said, oops, I have a question or a comment about your presentation. So if there's a way that I can encourage further communication with Christ Memorial in any way, I'm totally going to be talking to the youth pastor and the other pastors and our new worship director. Steve Martin should be aware of this. He should see your presentation. I think if you took this presentation to consistories in every church in town, you'd have enough people to do it 3 or 4 times in the summer. The older people in our church, and I'm one of them, I could identify with this 80-year-old lady that you blessed on the beach, because what would be more important to us as we leave this world? That our youth will be involved in the future church.
Amen.
That's my only prayer. Really, my only prayer is for my grandchildren and great-grandchildren now to come to know Jesus and to love Jesus and serve him. And this is hope. This is hope at Hope.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Isn't that the truth? No, thank you. We would love to do this more often. And it's a small group that you're targeting, right? It's not a sports camp where it's all high school. It's the kids that really are passionate about God, and we're trying to raise that generation up. And like Matt Scogan, he speaks to our kids every year. Whoever the president of Hope happens to be has spoken to our kids. We've had 3 different presidents speak. And Matt makes a point. He says, students, God may be leading you to be a pastor. He might lead you to be a worship leader. He might lead you to be a dentist. But you've got a gift of playing the flute, use it in the church. And he'll always say to me a couple of times a year, I love this. I love this. how big can you get it? How big can you get it? And my answer is always as big as God grows it, because I go everywhere I can and spread the news. In fact, Steve and I had lunch. He's well aware of Awakening. He came with me. I met with Josh's middle school group at Christ Memorial and the high school group last week. And we took 2 Hope students with us, Bethany and Alex. So that was awesome. Yes.
That actually leads into this first question, new question. While I can understand the accent on the arts, what about the students who might feel excluded by the artistic expression?
So that's a question that I get once in a while from people. So I'm not really into music and I don't really speak. There's a variety of courses for them to take. So it's afternoons that we really spend our times in lessons, whether it's any form of arts. But if they don't have an arts gift, like visual arts, dancing, or any of that stuff, there are other opportunities for them. So that doesn't preclude them for not coming. For example, technology. We have students every year that are interested in technology. Well, tell me a church that doesn't need a tech person, right? So we have training on sound technology as well. Mhm.
That's excellent. There's one more. Is writing liturgy or prayers part of the arts consideration for this program?
Was prayer,
Is writing liturgy or prayers part of the arts consideration for this program?
yes, students have the opportunity depending on the class that they're in, to write prayers within a liturgy. And especially when they formate the service that they work together on as a team, they write that out. So they'll not only their own prayers will they write out, although some will just extemporaneously pray. Others will write out responsive readings, short ones for us in the congregation. That'll be seen on the screen at the end. But yes, that's part of it. Anyone else? I got 2 more slides to show. One is a verse that I want you to keep in mind. It's from 1 Timothy, and we talk to our students about this every year. Don't let anyone look down on you because you're young, but set an example for believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, in purity. That's kind of our theme verse for Awakening. We don't want kids to look down on them. This is our postcard that we use. So I have copies of that in the back. I have postcards. We send them out to different churches and I leave them available to different youth groups. Awakening is June 12 to 17 this year. It's right after school finishes, basically, before kids get their jobs. And it comes at a great time for Hope, because this campus, if it's not COVID, is extremely busy in the summertime. So for us to be all over campus in various spots, that's just like the ideal week. So thank you for joining us. I encourage you to go to our website, hope.edu/awakening. That is the place to go to find out more about it. We have a number of different pages, videos, texts. It's all there for you. So thank you for this opportunity to speak to you about Awakening. Feel free to email me with any question you have. I'll come to any church at any time.
Well, Jim, on behalf of the people who were here to hear you and who heard you electronically, I want to thank you for a fine presentation about a wonderful program. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Haspen.
Yes, on behalf of everyone at Haspen, everyone at home, I will be closing the class, but I know you're all giving a virtual round of applause to a really wonderful presentation, and it will be on our HASP YouTube channel for later viewing. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and thank you so
Great.
much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.